Diavolo the demon has been defeated. The undying spirits of Abbachio, Narancia, and Buccuriati created a golden wind that carried Giorno to his dream, unlocking the requiem and becoming a gang star. Passione is victorious, and the streets of Italy are just a little bit safer because of it. Part 5 of JoJo really plays as more of an epic than the parts that came before. While Vento Aureo was JoJo's take on a Godfather-esque mob storyline, it really leaned into the religious symbolism and ideology that comes from a setting in Italy. But I think the Christian allegory is actually a little more evident than most may see at first glance. So indulge me for a moment as I do my best to show that Giorno Giovanna is a modern interpretation of Jesus Christ. Before we can delve right into that, however, we need to take a look at his father, or rather, his fathers, plural. Most people credit Dio as Giorno's father, which makes sense. Dio was the one that slept with Giorno's mother, and Giorno has Dio's iconic blonde hair. But Dio could only father Giorno because he was using Jonathan Joestar's body. We see that Giorno is clearly a Joestar. His hair was originally black, and he has the star birthmark on his left shoulder. And as far as I can tell, there is zero indication that Giorno inherited any vampiric traits from his Brando blood. But what does this have to do with Jesus? Well, Jesus is believed to have been fully God and fully man, a perfect hybrid of mortal and immortal. As for Giorno, he is fully Brando and fully Joestar. He's a perfect hybrid of the two natures that created him. But I know what you're thinking. Beware, just because Giorno comes from two worlds, this doesn't mean that he's part God and part man. Well, that's where you're wrong, kiddo. Dio is clearly meant to be an evil god. He is immortal, and he views his own existence as infinitely more important than everyone around him, to the point where humans and animals are little more than playthings to him. And if that wasn't enough, Dio is actually Italian for God. Dio's godly imagery is magnified even more during this shot in Part 3, where Polnareff continuously attempts to climb the stairs to face Dio, but he keeps getting pushed back during stopped time. This whole sequence represents man's struggle and futile inability to dwell in the realm of God. Man can never reach godhood, as Polnareff can never reach Dio, no matter how hard he tries. And this scene is built upon later in Part 5. Polnareff continues to represent humanity, but this time he is being attacked from below by Diavolo, the devil. Man eternally stands with God above him and the devil below him. So through this allegorical lens, Giorno is the son of God, a perfect hybrid of mortal and immortal, and his mission is to defeat the devil and conquer evil here on Earth. He's Jesus. But the connections don't stop there at the surface level. See, Giorno's hybrid nature is apparent in the choices that he makes as well. While previous JoJos all acted as heroes or crusaders, Giorno willingly pursues a criminal lifestyle. He indulges his dual nature by joining the mob, a group that achieves goodness through evil means. He does holy work through very human actions, and his duality is also found in his personality. I touched on this in my previous JoJo video. Giorno is outwardly just like Jonathan, overly polite and respectful, with a strong sense of justice for when innocent people get hurt, and a self-sacrificial nature for the good of his own team or his own cause. But at the same time, he's just as calculating as Dio, always scheming and quietly pulling strings to ensure his own victory, and swindling those around him for his own gain. He's vengeful and violent if you have evil intent. His choice of quote-unquote ministry is a metaphor as well. Giorno chooses to better the world by joining a gang, and gangs work primarily behind the scenes. They use bribes, assassinations, and thievery to silently shape the world around them. A gang functions very differently than, for instance, an army, which is loud and direct. It's like comparing a scalpel to a hammer. Giorno's choice of method is represented in his stand as well. Star Platinum and Crazy Diamond were these huge, buff stands with crazy speed and strength. They could basically bulldoze any opponent they wanted, so long as no special stand hacks were active. But Gold Experience is different. It's not particularly strong or fast. Instead, it uses nature to take down its enemies. Plants and animals, these quiet forces under Giorno's command, use trickery and special skills to defeat his enemies. In the same way that a gang is a contrast to a crusade, the quiet power of nature is in contrast to the excessive noise of humanity. This is yet another connection to Jesus, a man who unmistakably changed the world around him, but did so in a quiet way. He never won a war or fought a battle. In fact, he didn't even leave the small area where he was born and raised. Jesus managed to change the world in a non-violent way that differentiated him from the warriors and tyrants of history. Giorno changed the world through the quiet power of nature and through the underground action of the mob, differentiating him from the loud and boisterous actions of the Joestars that preceded him. Even Gold Experience Requiem represents this silent, behind-the-scenes type of world-shaping power. Its ability to completely unwrite the actions or attacks of an enemy is something that not even Giorno himself is aware of. It's so meta. Giorno is used to doing things quietly and behind closed doors, but the most broken ability in the JoJo world so far is one he doesn't even know exists, despite the fact that it's actually happening right in front of his face. That's great. I love it so much. There are actually a few other ways that Requiem ties Giorno to the Jesus allegory, but I'll get to those in a moment. First, I want to talk about Diavolo. Diavolo is meant to represent the devil, as I stated previously, but it's a little more complicated than that. His origin is insane and never explained. He was born to an imprisoned mother who was pregnant for 2 whole years and hadn't slept with a man for a while before that. This is clearly a bastardization of the Christmas story, a perversion of the virgin birth of Jesus, which means Diavolo is the Antichrist. Or, I suppose, Doppio is the Antichrist and Diavolo is the devil that inhabits him? I'm not quite sure about the terminology, but one thing is very clear. Doppio and Diavolo are 2 separate souls. Polnareff's theory that they are simply split personalities is completely incorrect. Otherwise, they would have been tied to the same soul during the body swap by Silver Chariot Requiem. Diavolo, whose true form looks like the stand that we call King Crimson, is the devil himself. Hell, at the time of the series, Diavolo is 33 years old, the same age Jesus was when he died. It's obvious that Diavolo is meant to be the opposite of Jesus, the Antichrist reverse of Giorno's Christ. And don't even get me started on the obvious implications of Giorno's abilities. Firstly, he creates life from inanimate objects. For this allegory, I want to point you towards this verse from the Bible, John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. An incredibly common interpretation of this verse is that the Word is Jesus. Jesus is the Word that God used to speak life into the universe when he created it. In the same way, Giorno is the means by which life is actualized into the world. Not only that, but what was Jesus' golden rule? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In other words, treat people the way you want to be treated. I can't think of a better visual representation of this lesson than Giorno's ability to return damage to anyone who attacks one of his plants or animals. His enemies are literally doing to themselves what they chose to do to something else. And of course, he can heal people. Not as well as Josuke can, sure, but he can fix bullet holes, missing eyes, feet, hands, section of the throat and torso. He's been doing miraculous healing just like Jesus did in the Bible. And in the case of Buccuriati, he actually raised a man from the dead. Hello, Lazarus? It's obvious that Giorno's powers are based off of Jesus. Little author's note here, yeah, I know Buccuriati came back partially because of the destruction of Rolling Stones, but how much Giorno helped in the effort is unclear at best, so I'm going to count this as a minor resurrection feat. Okay, end author's note. And finally, let's get back to Requiem. During the final battle with Diavolo, Giorno uses the stand arrow on himself. He stabs himself in the chest, effectively committing suicide. In this moment, Giorno sacrificed his own life to save Trish, Mista, and the whole of Italy. He did it to avenge the souls of his lost comrades. Diavolo took this time to attack, but he found that Gold Experience was just an empty husk, a shell with nothing inside. Giorno, now with Gold Experience Requiem, has been resurrected in a form of total power and glory. Glowing with a radiant white energy, he defeats Diavolo and banishes him to an eternity of torment. At the end, he takes his rightful place at the throne, now the dawn of Passione. The parallels are obvious. Jesus also forfeit his life to save the world from the power of the devil, and even though he died, when his tomb was searched, all that was found was an empty tomb. Jesus was resurrected, and having defeated sin and the devil, ascended into heaven to take his rightful place as King of creation. Christ reset humanity's sins to zero, just as Requiem does to the actions of his enemies. Even the glow of Requiem, the radiant white, is designed to mimic the image of a beatific Jesus who showed his disciples his true godly form. And if all of this still hasn't convinced you, look where the stand arrow pierces his arm. Remind you of anything? I mean, come on, it doesn't get much clearer than this. You know, when I started writing the script, I was planning on explaining all of the symbolism in Part 5. But as I did my research, watching and rewatching the series, I started to find more than what I originally bargained for. The illusions of Giorno being a modern Jesus were more than enough to base an entire essay on, so that's what I decided to do. And you know what? I'm glad I did. Of course the characters are lovable and the action is incredible, but if you don't have an analytical eye, it's easy to dismiss Part 5 as uninteresting. Giorno could be seen as boring, his stand overpowered, the villain too simplistically evil. But when you begin to read between the lines, a really incredible picture starts to form. A picture that shows a hero unwilling to lie dormant as a slave to the fate the world has chosen for him. He changed his fate and the fate of everyone around him. That's Goldenwind. That's Giorno Giovanna. And that is why Part 5 is my favorite so far. Which of the 8 parts is your favorite and why? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in those comments below. Just try not to spoil anything that hasn't been animated yet, alright? Anyway, thanks so much for watching and supporting my channel. Remember to drop a like or consider watching another one of my videos. Arrivederci, and stay frosty.